بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد الصادق الوعد الأمين وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه الغر المحجلين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا متقبلا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك اللهم ونتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to our next class on the fiqh of salah, understanding our prayers. And last time we were talking about several nawafil prayers, several prayers which are supererogatory at certain times of the day or certain occasions. And we now move on to praying the nafil prayer and certain circumstances related to prayer that may not be what is practiced with the obligatory prayer, for instance. And the first thing I think is, can we sit down and pray nafil prayers? So we have with us Hassan as usual. Assalamu alaikum, Hassan.
Walaikum assalam, Shaykh.
How are you doing? You okay?
Alhamdulillah, not too bad. Everything good?
MashaAllah. Are you ready? You ready for today?
Yes, Bismillah.
So Bismillah, let's start then, inshallah. Off you go.
Bismillah. Optional prayer while sitting and prayer upon a beast or means of transport. Optional prayer is permitted sitting even if one has the ability to stand, although one receives only half the reward of the one standing unless there is a reason. And during the prayer, one is to sit like a person in the tashahhud, and this is the preferred view on the matter.
Yeah, brilliant, mashallah. So you can pray any supererogatory prayer, nafil prayer, sitting down without an excuse, without a reason. It's just a choice you have. If you do decide to do that, then first of all, there's half the reward. And second, you sit in the position you would sit as you would when sitting in prayer, which is called the tashahhud position. For men, it's with the left foot under the buttocks, with the right foot erect, and with which is called the iftirash position. For the ladies, they put both their legs to one side, to the right, and that's called the tawarruk position. And that's the chosen opinion. Yeah, brilliant. Next one.
It is permissible to complete an optional prayer sitting after starting it standing, according to Abu Hanifa. This is the most correct view.
Yeah, so if you started a prayer standing up, and during that prayer, nafil prayer we're talking about again, extra prayers, and you decided to sit down halfway through, you got tired, or just for whatever reason you wanted to sit down, that's also valid. Standing and starting the prayer stand does not mean you have to complete it standing, although some did indicate that that was required. However, Imam Abu Hanifa said there's no dislike even in starting the prayer standing and then finishing it sitting if it's a nafil prayer, and that is the most correct opinion indeed. Bismillah.
Optional prayer upon a beast or a means of transport. A person outside the city is permitted to offer optional prayer whilst riding on the back of a beast, and he is to pray through indication toward any direction the beast turns.
Yeah, so when it comes to praying on a vehicle, so in the olden days they had animals, of course, like camels, horses, and these kind of things, and they traveled many miles and long distance journeys on these animals. And today we have vehicles such as trains, cars, and other modes of transport. So the rulings will slightly differ because it's not the same thing. It's not another being that has its own mind and so forth. It's a piece of machinery. But in terms of some of the practical steps and some of the rulings, they will be similar. But first of all, let's go to this actual masala of an animal. So it's not, this doesn't necessarily apply to cars. It may well do, but it doesn't always. If you're outside of the city, so first of all, if you're within your city, you're not left the city boundaries. And this doesn't mean you have to be on a journey. You just have to leave the city boundaries. So you're on the motorway, you're traveling somewhere, maybe 10, 20 miles from home, but you've left the city boundaries to another city, to the town, and you are on an animal and you want to pray. You have to get down for the fard prayers. It doesn't say that here, right? For fard prayers, you have to get down and pray on the ground. But for nafil prayers, you can pray as the Prophet ﷺ did, whilst on the animal, facing whatever direction actually the animal faces. Doesn't matter either. And you have to pray with indication or gestures. So you won't be able to do a prostration or a bowing. So how do you do it? You gesture with your head. You bend your head forwards, or your neck in particular, to perform the ruku'. So it's bending of the neck and the gesture kind of thing. And we said this before, the sajda has to be lower than the ruku' in your gestures, right? And that in that way you can perform nawafila, and extra prayers, supererogatory prayers, on an animal whilst um, outside of the city. Now, does that apply to cars today and other vehicles? Yes, if you're not the driver. So somebody driving a train, the person, or somebody driving a car, more likely cannot do that, because if you drive, you can't drive and pray. You got to just drive. A passenger may do that. So if you're a passenger in a car or on a train and there's nawafil prayers and you want to pray them whilst on this, you don't have to go and face it. If you can face the qibla, fantastic. If the particular direction is close to qibla, face it. But if not, you just can pray your nawafil prayer. And this includes, by the way, if you want to, so the question is just what do you mean by nawafil prayer? We said at the beginning, nafil indicates every prayer that is not fard or wajib. So including the sunnah prayers as well. Yes, so if you're praying your sunnahs of Zohar, for instance, you could pray them in this manner as well. So you stop for your fard, but if you want to carry on the journey, you don't stop for too long, you can pray your nawafil whilst on the vehicle, but obviously not as the driver. If you're the driver, then you just carry on driving, and you got to obviously do that job of driving a vehicle. And also for the two sunnahs of Fajr as well, we don't do this. This is going to be mentioned, actually, it's coming up. If you read on, Hassan.
If one begins an optional prayer up on the back of a beast and then dismounts, he is to continue the prayer. Though if one begins on the ground, he cannot continue the prayer if he mounts the beast.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. So, if you start, and this is to do with, obviously, not just moving too much, but also the fact that you praying in different ways. So, if you started on the animal, it says here, because it says here, so yes, I'm trying to get it the right way around. So if you're on the animal first and you start the prayer on the animal, and you get down during the prayer without doing too much movements, obviously that's important that we don't forget the rule of excessive movement breaks the prayer. So if you get down by just sliding down and basically standing next to the animal, just try to get off basically, and not make loads of movements, and it's almost like you're doing something else other than praying, right? So if you're in a situation where you can get off without making massive movements, that would apply. Both these situations aren't going to really occur for anyone, I doubt. And you can carry on, right? Why? Because it's the same prayer. You would carry, it's nafil prayer. You can be sitting down, you can be standing up, etc. However, it says you can't do it the other way around, in that if you start the prayer standing, you can't now get onto an animal and continue the prayer. Uh, the main reason is because you have started a proper prayer of standing, bowing, prostrating, and you can't change that into a prayer of gesturing, just indicating, as well as the fact that to get onto an animal would also require a lot of movement, much more than getting off. Getting off, you can slide off and that's it. Getting on, you've got to get your leg over, you got to, etc. And very unlikely to do it that way around anyway. But the main reason is that you've committed to a proper prayer standing up. You can sit down and pray, but you can't gesture and pray from this commencement. So yeah, so you wouldn't be able to carry on a prayer if you were getting into a vehicle, if you started standing up, but you could if you're getting out or getting off a vehicle or a means of transport. Yeah, so Bismillah. And I was going to mention the point I just mentioned earlier about what prayers you can pray on an animal or otherwise. Bismillah then.
Prayer through the nodding on the back of a beast is permitted for the emphasized sunnah as well as other sunnah, even if it is a sunnah of the dawn. Although Abu Hanifa held that one must dismount the beast for the sunnah of the dawn prayer, as it is more emphasized than other sunnah.
Yeah, mashallah, that's correct. Actually, the correct opinion is that that is the case, right? So it should be worded. You can pray all sunnah prayers apart from sunnat al-fajr, on a mount, on an animal, etc. Why? Because they are the most emphasized of all prayers. They're very close to wajib. The sunnah we don't classify them as wajib, but because they are so emphasized, then they take on the rulings of close to what is wajib. Hence, Imam Abu Hanifa and other great scholars said for the Sunnah of Fajr, we would alight and pray on the ground, a normal standing prayer, just like the Fard and Wajib prayers. However, for any other prayer, any Sunnah Muakkada, any Sunnah Ghair Muakkada, any Nawafil, this ruling of praying standing or sitting, praying on a mount without facing the Qibla whilst outside of the city, on the mount, etc. These all apply to these prayers. And just to make a point here, when Hassan's reading, or you hear the word gesturing, indication, nodding, they all mean the same thing. The word in Arabic is ima. Ima is like gesturing, indicating, moving the body in some way, like a nod, a gesture. So nodding is the word used here because you're going to be using your head to do this, right? Using your neck and head to indicate towards the ruku, and then back up, and then the sujood back down. So this is why I said nodding or gesturing or indicating. It refers to this movement. So that's a very important part here, which also applies to an ill person who can't maybe physically move. How would such a person pray? Is considered to be, or is required to pray with ima, the same nodding or gesturing with the head. So that's something that we'll see the mention of often in the coming sort of pages regarding certain types of prayer or situations in Salah, inshallah ta'ala. Yeah, to carry on, please, Hassan.
It is permissible for one offering optional prayer to lean on something such as a stick or wall if he becomes tired and there is no dislike.
Yep.
If, however, there is no reason, then it is disliked according to the correct view, for it is considered as bad manners.
Yeah, don't need to rest on something. Don't. If you're a bit tired or you got maybe illness or bad leg or something, you can rest on something to help you stand up. Yeah, fine. Bismillah.
Filth upon a beast does not prevent the prayer from being valid, even if the filth is on the saddle or stirrups, and this is the most correct view.
Yeah, so obviously animals will carry filth with them on, they urinate, they might brush against something. So if the place you are sitting on, the saddle, or the place your feet are in, the stirrup, have najasa in them, this does not affect not on you. So it's not on your sandals, or it's not on your socks or your trousers. It's just on there somewhere, maybe dried up najasa, or etc. That doesn't affect your prayer. That's just part and parcel of what comes with animals. So yeah, that doesn't affect the validity of the prayer. Bismillah.
Prayer is not permitted walking, and this has the agreement of consensus.
Yeah, so the prayer walking is not. There's no such thing as walking and praying, running and praying, because you have to pray in one place. In the place, obviously, if you're moving in a vehicle, your place, the vehicle is moving, but you're in one place. Similarly, you can't walk with your own body and move around whilst praying. That's not allowed. That breaks the prayer. So that's 2 steps, 3 steps, and it breaks the prayer. So you can't. You can make a little shuffle or 1 step, but you can't move constantly in prayer. That would break the prayer, and it's invalid by consensus. Yeah. Last week we had a question on praying whilst at sea, and the ships moving and turning and so forth, and we answered that question actually. And this week, I think not this next section, but the section after, is praying on a boat. So it's coming, inshallah. But first, before that, praying on a saddle itself, or praying on a carriage. Bismillah, Hassan.
Obligatory and wajib prayers on a beast. Obligatory and wajib prayers are not permitted on a beast, and neither is the funeral prayer. Examples of necessary prayers include the witr, the prayer that one promises to perform, and voluntary prayer that was ruined. Likewise, the prostration of recital is not permitted upon a beast if its verse was recited on the ground.
Yeah, so fard prayers, wajib prayers are not permitted on the ground, right? So we explained that fard and wajib not permitted on an animal or on riding on a beast, and any of the prayers, sunnah muakkada, ghair muakkada, nawafil, they are allowed on beasts outside of the city, or whilst in the city you can pray them sitting down, right? So those are 2 rulings we mentioned. What is a fard prayer? It's the 5 daily prayers of fard. What is a wajib prayer? Witr is wajib. The mandur, which is a vowed prayer. So if you vow to pray to Allah, say I pray 2 rakats to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if so and so arrives on time, you want them to be home safely and so forth, and they arrive, you got to pray 2 rakats. It's called a vow. It can be conditional, it can be unconditional. I vow to pray 2 rakats to Allah. So it could be mutlaq, unrestricted, unconditional, or it could be restricted to time, place, or connected to on stipulated by an action. This is the area of vows, which is something discussed at the end of al-Idaah, this book as well. But if you do end up having to pray a vowed prayer, it's a wajib form of prayer. Also, if you break a nafil prayer, and similarly for the fast as well, this is a question that arises in Shawwal because people fast the fast of Shawwal, and they've always heard, oh, you can break your nafil fast. Can I break my fast today? And you say, yes, you can because it's nafil fast. But just like if you break a nafil fast, and just like and likewise here, when you break a nafil prayer, it is a wajib. It's necessary to now make that up. Okay, so it's no sin in breaking the prayer, or it depends on the reason for breaking the prayer, I suppose. There's no sin in breaking the fast. You have a choice to do that. It's a nafil fast. But if you do decide to break it and not continue it, then you will be required to complete that fast, or make it up another day, whenever. It could be tomorrow, it could be a week later, a month later, but you got to do that. You got to remember that. So the sooner you do it, the better. With nafil prayer, what would probably happen is you broke it by breaking your wudu, for instance, or you broke it by something. And then what happens? It doesn't matter how you broke it. You got to make that nafil prayer up as well. That's a wajib form of prayer. And then it says sajda of Salatul Janaza is a fard prayer, right? So it's not regarded as a fard or wajib prayer. Sorry, it's not regarded as a wajib prayer, but it's not in this ruling simply because you don't have to bow prostrate in janaza. So you can pray on a mount. Yeah, you can sit and pray. You can stand and pray. You can pray, you can stand and pray, sit and pray if you have got an excuse. But if you have to be on a mount or you're traveling, yes, it is valid. And also sajda to tilawa, that is recited. No, sorry, you cannot pray the janaza prayer on a mount. You have to get off. Sorry, excuse me. It's just not one of the wajib prayers. You can't pray a janaza while it's on a mount as well, and nor can you make the prostration of recital. If it was recited while standing, you can't get on a mount and then make the prostration. If you're reciting the Quran while it's traveling and you're on a mount, on a vehicle or something, and you recite an ayah of sajda, then you can actually perform the sajda whilst you're on the vehicle with gestures. But if you're just normal sitting around like now and you make a sajda recital, then you can't get up on an animal and do that sajda. It has to be done on the ground properly. Bismillah, Hassan, if you want to carry on after that, sorry.
Permissible upon the beast when there is a necessity, such as one who fears for himself, his beast, or clothes from a thief, if he dismounts. Other valid reasons include fear from a predatory animal or the ground is excessively muddy.
Yeah, so now this exception is for all the previous masail. So you can't pray on for these prayers. You can't pray on a mount or on an animal, except for a necessity. And there's given examples of that. So if you fear somebody attacking you, if you fear your animal's going to flee off, if you actually can't get back on the animal for whatever reason, maybe you haven't got assistance. You had assistance at the beginning of your journey. You no longer have assistance now. It's very dirty on the ground. Like wherever I get off here, I can't really pray anywhere here. It's all muddy, filthy. Better off praying on the animal. Yeah, so and for a necessity, a darura, you can remain on the mount and pray, even the fard prayer, wajib prayer, but that's only for a necessity. And some of those examples are just being read there by Hassan. So yeah, that's only for necessities. Bismillah.
Equally, if the beast will become uncontrollable or there is no helper present to assist him to remount the beast due to its inability.
Yep. Bismillah, carry on. We mentioned that.
Okay, so that's the end of that. So the prayer in a carriage.
Yeah.
Prayer in a carriage which is fixed upon a beast is regarded like prayer on its back, and it is the same whether the beast is moving or still. If one stops the beast and places logs underneath the carriage so that the base of the carriage is leaning on the ground, using the logs as pillars, the carriage is regarded as having the same status as the ground. And in this situation, it is correct to perform the obligatory prayer standing in the carriage, not sitting.
That's right. So, two scenarios. One, you just got a normal carriage on the back of an animal, like a camel. So, this is probably referring to more like a camel. Then this was like being on an animal. It doesn't matter if you're on the back of the animal, on a saddle, or on a carriage. It doesn't matter whether it's moving or stationary. It's like the same rulings that we just had previously. Nafil prayers are valid outside of the city on it. fard prayers are not valid on that type of on the animal unless there's a necessity, etc. Okay, so that there are carriages on animals, and that's how it works. However, if you make that carriage attached to the ground, and carriages that are horses hold up, for instance, are attached to the ground by default, they're on wheels, right? And they're held erect by horses, or steady, or they're moved by horses, but they are just normally a carriage without the horses on them even. Or if you were to make a support, which was done in the past, and hence is mentioned here, where the carriage is not taken off the animal, but it has given it. Sometimes they build steps up to the carriage and this kind of stuff. And that support actually would render the carriage connected to the ground without the animal. So it's like almost like an independent structure holding up the carriage. In that case, as it says there, it'd be like it's attached. It's like you're on the earth, on the ground, if you're in that carriage. And for that circumstance, very rare circumstance as well, I'd say, not common, you could pray on the carriage, right? Even though it's a carriage of an animal, etc. It's because it's connected to the ground. More practically for us, what does that mean? It means if your car is stationary, then you can pray on top of your car. Yes, because your car is connected to the ground. It's not an animal at the end of the day, right? It's not you're on the back of an animal. Like I said, there's differences. You're on the back of pieces of metal and plastic, whatever it is, cars, right? So yes, you can pray on the top of your car if it's stationary. Bismillah, right? So you can pray on a vehicle that's stationary today's day and age, because they're not animals, right? These were animals that even if they were stationary, you would not be valid to pray your obligatory prayers on them because they're animals. Now, obviously, the modes of transport we have are different. They're machinery, and if you made that stationary, it's like having like pieces of wood. In the end of the day, right? That was what it's talking about here. It's a carriage. End of the day, what's a car? It's a carriage with wheels, right? So yes, you can pray on your vehicle if it's stationary. But you have to stand, of course. So not sitting. We're not saying you can pray in the vehicle. We're saying you pray on the vehicle. So you have to stand. You have to do all the rules of prayer. But you can actually pray on that. And practically also, it means that if you were standing on some kind of object, some kind of platform, a stage, a raised platform, and these kind of things, that's what it's saying here. Basically, if you make the carriage of an animal into that kind of structure, it becomes valid, and hence valid for us in any other circumstance that's similar to that. That may be with a vehicle or not with a vehicle, right? So that's what we need to take from these masail. So we're learning maybe a particular thing here, which is a general rule that's actually being applied to this situation, which is as long as the structure you're on is attached and firmly on the ground without any movement or without any living being in between you, like let's say that, then that's fine. So it could be a wooden structure, it could be a metal structure, it could be with wheels, it could, as long as it's stationary, as long as the brakes are on and all that, it's not moving and stuff, it's not going to roll down the hill and kill you, right? And make sure you got your handbrake up, etc. In all those circumstances, that structure between you and the ground is a structure which is fine, valid to pray upon, and that's the ruling we need to remember and apply to all of our situations if you find yourself in this situation. The situation of a boat, which was last week's question, is different, and hence there's a separate section on that coming up. Any questions on that, Hassan?
No, I think relatively, I think you've gone through. I mean, a lot of it would be preying on a beast.
Yeah.
Not really going to apply much to us.
That's
here.
right. Yeah. It doesn't really apply to us.
I think for us, I mean, is there anything specific for most of the time when it's going to be issues when you're flying? I don't know. Is there anything coming?
Yeah. So when it comes to the boat and the sea, that's closer to flying. So yeah, let's discuss the next section, then we can talk about airplanes and stuff. Yeah.
Prayer on a ship. Offering obligatory prayer on a moving ship in a sitting posture without having a reason to sit is valid according to Abu Hanifa, and one is to offer the prayer through bowing and prostration while sitting.
Yeah, so now we move on to this masala of a boat, right? So according to Abu Hanifa, first of all, this is Imam Hanifa's position. We're going to find maybe some differences as you're going to read next. Is that if you're actually on a moving boat, right? Then you can pray sitting down without an excuse. So it's a moving boat, wherever it's going, you decide to pray. Obviously, you stand and pray. We talk about the obligatory prayer. If it's a nafil prayer, you can sit down anyway. So for the obligatory prayer, as it says at the beginning there, you can sit and pray if you're on a moving boat. Of course, you got to remain facing the qibla, and you got to keep doing your ruku and your sujood as normal, right? So it says bir ruku, it was sujood, like you got to pray not with gestures, not like indication and nodding. You got to pray with the proper ruku, which is you're bending your back. Even sitting down, you can do a proper ruku, And obviously, the proper sajda is put your head on the ground or the the surface of the boat, whatever it is, um, even without an excuse. However, the Sahibain, what did they say?
However, Imams Abu Yusuf and Muhammad held that one is not permitted to sit unless he has a reason to do so, and this is the most evident opinion.
Yes,
And a valid reason may include dizziness or being unable to exit the ship.
yeah. So they said the Sahibain, Abu Yusuf and Abu Muhammad ibn Hassan are two students or many students of Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Muhammad ibn Hassan was the most prolific writer of the students. He was like a scribe. He wrote many books. Wrote the most books out of all the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, and hence recorded all the discussions that took place in the circles of Imam Abu Hanifa. He didn't just write about his teacher. He wrote about all the things that went on and the different opinions. But because he did so, and because Imam Abu Yusuf was also somebody close to him and who he wrote about often, and who also wrote many books as well, these three people in particular are regarded as the main three scholars of the Hanafi school of Islamic law, of jurisprudence, and they don't agree with each other on everything. So in this case, the students have disagreed with the teacher, but sometimes it's Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Abu Yusuf who disagree with Imam Muhammad, and so forth. So they were scholars and mujtahids, as we'd say, the scholars who can derive rulings in their own right. And they had the understanding here that you need an excuse to sit down and pray, and the same applies to a boat, a ship that's moving. Obviously, there's reasons why Imam Hanifa had his opinion, there's reasons why they had their opinion, and that's scholarly kind of discourse. Practically for us, what does it say? It says وَهُوَ الْأَظْهَرُ, I mean this is the most evident, meaning the most, it should be the one that's followed. But scholars have done lots of discussions on whether or not which one we follow. There's hadith, there's reasoning behind this as well. But what are the excuses? So what is an excuse? Obviously, if you're on a boat, you feel dizzy. So if you feel the seasickness or dizziness, or you can't get off the boat, right? And you have to stay on it. Then what? Then you have to pray, and I'm gonna sit down and pray. Okay, that's fine. Right? You've got an excuse. Then in that case, everyone agrees you can pray sitting down because you've got an excuse. There's another point here if you want to carry on, and let's get through all of these first before we start talking about the stuff. Yeah.
One is not permitted to offer the prayer in the ship through indication if he is able to bow and prostrate, and this is agreed upon.
Yeah. So if somebody's normal, if he can bow and prostrate, he's not ill. So if somebody's got normal health, can bow and prostrate, then in a ship, either they pray standing or sitting, it's agreed that you must perform the ruku and the sujood. Yep, there's no excuse not to perform them. If you haven't got a valid excuse, which is an illness or a back problem or something. So that's agreed upon. Bismillah.
If a ship at sea is tied down with an anchor or is being swayed by a strong wind, then it is regarded as a moving ship. Although if the ship is not being swayed, then it is deemed as a still ship at shore, and this is the most correct view.
Yeah, so the ruling of the stationary ship is coming next, okay? But just another situation where a ship is regarded as moving, and that is when it's in the middle of the sea and so it's stationary, but it's middle of the sea, but the wind is moving it, so it's not stationary. It's in a sense, being affected by, it says severe, obviously strong winds. Then it's like a moving one, and meaning what? Meaning Imam Abu Hanifa says you can pray sitting down, and Imam Abu Yusuf and Muhammad say no. Even then, you need an excuse. So if dizziness is an excuse that comes about, then you can pray sitting down. If not, you can deal with that situation. Then pray standing up. However, if it's not moving by the wind, if it's not a strong wind there, then it's stationary. Then that's fine, right? That's a stationary boat now. And regarding stationary boats or ships, what do we do? If you read on, Hassan.
If the ship is tied at shore, prayer is not valid. Prayer is not permitted sitting if one has the ability to stand according to the majority. And if one prays standing and there is part of the ship on the bottom of the ground then the prayer is valid. If not, then the prayer is not permitted in it according to the preferred view on the matter unless it is not possible to exit the ship.
Yeah, so there's a few things mentioned together there, but they all make sense. So first of all, it's a stationary boat, right? It's not moving. Okay, if it's not moving, it's just stationary, then everyone agrees you have to pray standing up. Okay, so no sitting down now, right? Bil ijma, it says. Although there is some opinions or some reports, there might be a difference. But let's go with what it says there, and it says you're not allowed to pray sitting down. You pray standing up because not moving. There's no reason for you to worry about anything. Um, so if one does pray standing up, is it a valid prayer? Yes, it is because it's a valid prayer. But there's a reason mentioned here why it wouldn't be. It says if you pray in this boat, and first of all, if it's out in the sea, then obviously it's valid. Okay. Um, then there's a situation where it could be stationed next to the land. Okay. It says if one prays standing and part of the boat was on the land, then it's valid. Okay. So it goes the other way around first. It mentions if it's close to the land or you're on the land anyway. It's like the same, like the previous situation of the carriage. You've got something between you and the land, pieces of wood. You're on a boat. Between you and the land are pieces of wood, right? Boats were made of wood and stuff, right? So it's just a structure between you and the ground. It's valid. That's the first thing mentioned, which is the same as before. We applied it to a boat. But this is that if part of the boat's over land. Okay, it's not over land. What if it's not over land? Then it says it's not valid to pray in the ship unless you can't get out of it, which means in the middle of the sea, right? So if you're in the middle of the sea, you can't get out, you can't jump overboard, right? Where are you going to go to, right? It's just the sea. Then obviously your prayer is valid standing in a stationary boat. And if you go back to the beginning, if it's moving, then obviously it's going to be at sea, and you can pray sitting down without an excuse, according to Abu Hanifa, or with an excuse, according to the two companions. So if you do pray on a boat, just make sure it's not at shore, because if it's at shore, then or sometimes actually there's other situations where it's not on the land. Actually, obviously, if you go to ports and stuff, you will see boats that are not on land. So they're not. So on land means you're above the land. Some of the surface of some of the part of the boat is actually on the land, like touching it, so forth. Mostly that doesn't occur. What occurs is boats are held out at anchor, right? Several meters away from the shore. Several meters. There's ports made to take them out there, so they are literally at sea. They just got lots of different ways to get to them. In those situations, it's also possible to get off the boats. It's also possible to get off the ships because there's staircases and stuff made towards them. So in those situations where the boat is just out there somewhere and there's a structure made, a stairway or some kind of walkway made to get on and off. In those circumstances, you would have to get off because the part of the boat is not over the land, and you can get off the boat. So both those rules don't apply. In that case, it's not valid to pray in the boat. You have to get off the boat and pray on the land. So just bear that in mind, okay? So there's three situations. You're out in the middle of the sea, pray standing up, pray sitting down. We've discussed that. You're over the land, then pray on the boat or pray off the boat. It's the same thing. And if you're in the sea or you're close to the land but you're at sea, but at the same time you can get off the boat. This is the third one we just discussed. You can get off the boat because there's ways of getting off while still at sea, of course. Then you have to get off and pray, and then get back on the boat to continue the journey or whatever, inshallah ta'ala. So if you do decide to pray on the vehicle, on the boat, how do you pray? So Bismillah, Hassan, you read on.
If the ship is sailing, one is to direct himself towards the Qibla at the commencement of the prayer, and every time the ship veers from the Qibla, one is to redirect himself towards it throughout the entire prayer so that he completes it whilst facing the Qibla.
Yeah, so that was what we mentioned last week, that you start the prayer facing the Qibla, because you can stand up and pray. Even if you're sitting down, you can face the Qibla. And if you're sitting down, you can shuffle around and move around in your prayer. So if the boat, obviously you're going to face the Qibla, right, and the boat's going to be going in one direction. So if the boat's not veering away from the Qibla, then fine, you can more or less towards the Qibla. You might have to move a tiny bit just to stay towards the Qibla, okay? But if the boat all of a sudden veers left like 90 degrees, then you move 90 degrees, haven't you? So what you've got to do is move 90 degrees the other way. So if the ship goes left, you got to go right. So you got to keep changing your posture, your direction of your chest when you're facing towards the Qibla, and maintain your face towards the Qibla as throughout the whole of the prayer if you're praying on a ship. That's if the ship turns, right? If it doesn't turn at all, then if you're obviously if it's towards the side, you would turn slightly. But if it's exactly in front of you, the Qibla, and the ship's not turning, then fine, you carry on facing straight ahead of you. So that's something to bear in mind while it's praying on a vehicle on a boat. Sorry, so this doesn't apply to the um, animal or the car, for instance, right? It's not like that. This is a ship. Now the question comes of the airplane. Before we move on to the next section, so there weren't no airplanes in the past. There were trains. There was there was animals, right? And then later on we had vehicles like trains and cars, etc. And now, more recently, we've got aviation and aeronautical stuff, and we've got flying, right? It's common. It's very, very common, in fact. So what do we do when it comes to um, flying and praying? That's the situation. So in this situation, the scholars have differed. First of all, there's no one opinion that is the final say. Um, but as we can see, um, the boat situation is very similar because there's nothing between you and the ground. First of all, right? There's a whole massive amount of air particles, right? And clouds and whatnot, right? So similarly, the water was that situation where if you're on water on the sea, and you can get off and pray on the land. It's not valid to pray on the sea. So you can't pray on a boat whilst having, as we just learned this very last mas'ala, whilst having the ability to come off the sea and come onto land. So similarly, on an aeroplane, you can't go and fly in the sky and say I'm praying here whilst you can get off. But the funny thing is, you can't get off a plane once it's in the air, or you can, but unless you got a parachute, you'll be in big trouble. So you can't get off. So the ruling applies now to being on a boat. When you're on a boat, what do you pray? You pray as best as you can, as it says there. If you could pray standing up, facing the Qibla, do so. Your prayer is valid, and that's the ideal situation. Just get up, face the Qibla, pray your prayer, and it's all done. If you can do that, alhamdulillah, brilliant. If not, then sit down and pray. So sit down. You can't really stand up. Sit down, face the Qibla still, and if the aeroplane changes direction, you change direction as we just learned there, and face the Qibla as much as possible and pray your prayers, right? So if that means facing backwards, so be it. Face backwards to your seat or whatever, sideways, and sit down and pray. If you can stand up, which you most likely can, but sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes they put the lights on saying you're not allowed to stand up. There's too much turbulence. That's a valid excuse. Turbulence. I'm going to pray my prayer sitting down. I don't want to miss it. I've got to pray. They're not allowed to stand up. Not because they don't want you to stand up and pray. Not because there's actually danger standing up. Okay, fantastic. I'll pray sitting down. My prayer is done. If you can't do that, you can't pray sitting down, you can't face the Qibla, then what the scholars have said, one of the opinions is that you still pray out of respect for the prayer and the time of prayer, and you pray with gestures in this case, right? You might not be able to pray fully by bowing and prostrating. If you can, then face the Qibla and pray, right? Because if you can do that, you should be able to be honest. But if you can't, then indicate and pray to the best of your ability. There might be, it might not be allowed for you to face the Qibla or to change your seat, etc. If you can't genuinely, because that might be the case, it's not they're forcing you to stay seated, and the Qibla is that way, so you can't really do a prayer. Then just pray with gestures, facing the opposite way. And when you get off the plane, or when you get an opportunity afterwards, to make up that prayer. But ideally, you want to pray on time. And some airlines, of course, more Muslim country-based airlines, would have facilities or allow it, and or be obviously aware of it. Some do have space and do even the pilots and staff pray on board as well. But not all are Muslim airlines, etc. So you might find it difficult, and some are not very nice, spacious aircraft either. So would probably be no space on some at all to pray whatsoever. So they might not allow you to pray in those circumstances. You can't, you can't face the Qibla and pray even sitting down. Then you respect the prayer time. You do a prayer of indication that is, it's 2 rakats, Allahu Akbar, and you indicate with it. And then when you get off the plane, you can you should repeat or make up the prayer because you didn't pray it properly. So you might say, what's the point of doing that when you're going to make it up anyway? True, what's the point of praying something when you're actually going to do it afterwards because you haven't prayed it? It's not valid. Your prayer's not valid. So why are you praying this gesture prayer for, etc.? This is a very important point actually, because the 5 daily prayers are not merely outward acts of worship. They're actually parts of our conditioning us, making us who we are. And this is mentioned in some books of fiqh as well, that for a lady who's not praying, certain days of the month, she should still sit down on a prayer mat and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 5 minutes during each prayer time. No, it's not an obligation on her, but to remind herself and her, that spiritual body clock, right, of the prayer times. and out of respect. So it says out of respect for the prayer. It doesn't say out of obligation to pray the prayer. So out of respect for the prayer time, one should realize it's a prayer time. I should have been praying to Allah subhanahu this time, and I will therefore gesture the prayer, indicate, nod, and pray, and then I'll make this up afterwards. So it's that reminding ourselves that this is a time to submit to Allah, to worship Allah, but due to circumstances I can't do that, right? And so forth, right? So that's the reason. That's the reason. At the end of the day, your prayer that you're going to pray, that's the actual prayer, is the one that when you get off the plane and you make it up because you weren't able to pray properly on the plane, etc. But if you can actually pray standing up, which you can on some airlines, they do give you the opportunity. There's people praying all the time. You go to Umrah, for instance, uh, it's pretty easy to do that, depending on the airline, of course. But most airlines, pretty easy to do that. They obviously know that you're going to do that. They'll allow it, and they'll even let you face the Qibla, make wudu, etc. So it's all good on some airlines. It's not as easy and good on others. So whatever situation you're in, try your best. And if the best is you've got to make it up when you get off, then so be it. But try and pray on the airline, facing the Qibla, your normal prayers. Even when people go on Umrah, they pray their nafil for ihram on the airplane as well. So it can be done. Some people say, oh, it's too difficult, it's this, it's that. I've been on many journeys like this. I've seen men and women. So women shouldn't say, oh, it's not. Women, Bismillah, there's curtains. Like I said, not all airlines and all situations are easy and the same, but it is possible. And if it is, Bismillah, go ahead and do it. And if it's not, then obviously, male or female, you won't be able to do it. You'll have to do your prayers when you get off the plane, in the transit, or in your destination, etc. So be it. That's something that is sometimes, unfortunately, unavoidable and difficult for us, because sometimes we have to travel and go places, etc. And it does compromise us, but that's life. And we ask Allah for forgiveness and facilitation. So hopefully, I think we've covered everything there. So I don't know, anything you want to ask or add to that?
It was the plane one is probably the one that was probably going to be the most kind of concerning. In summary, basically, if I got this right, Sheikh, is time of prayer, pray on a plane.
Yep.
A lot of the time, obviously, I mean, PIA or whatever, it depends where you're flying. You can probably stand up and go and find a space.
Yep.
But if you're on a non-Muslim airplane, if possible, sit and pray. Obviously, you understand that it could be a bit difficult being on a non-Muslim aeroplane. So in that circumstance, it would be better to just wait until you've got where you're going and then make up the prayer.
Yeah, non-Muslim
it can be
airline.
difficult on a non-Muslim.
All airplanes are non-Muslims, but the airline that's running it, maybe Muslim or non-Muslim, or predominantly Muslim, non-Muslim. So but what I would say is just ask. I've done that. It's happened to me. And you have to ask them politely. Sometimes they say no, not allowed. They obviously just straight away say no. Some of them actually say go and speak to the other guy. So they'll say go and speak to that. He's more senior, or whatever. Obviously, in the Muslim airlines, they'll just say to go to the back. They'll stay straight away. Obviously, they know you want to pray. They know people pray, etc. They pray themselves, and even if they don't pray themselves, they know. They always get asked that on the Muslim airlines. Obviously, they get Muslims praying all the time. You're right; it's different, obviously, and it can be awkward. But you should try at least. You should ask the question at least. And if the option is made possible to you, fine. If it's not, and it's likely not going to be because they don't cater for that, or they don't have the space for that sometimes even, then yeah, fine. Pray sitting down, facing the Qibla, and then make it up afterwards. Yeah, do repeat it afterwards. Yeah.
If you've prayed, let's say for example, you prayed your Asr on the aeroplane, you've landed where you are getting, and it's time for Asr. Would you have to redo Asr again? I mean, if you've already prayed it, is it required to?
No. So if you already prayed it properly, meaning you stood up and faced the Qibla, then there's no requirement for repetition. Okay.
But if you've sat down,
and faced the Qibla with a valid reason, again, there's no need to repeat it because you had a valid reason to sit down. Like on the ship, if you can't stand up, you can sit down and pray on the ship, face the Qibla, bow and prostrate. Same here. You couldn't stand up, but you bowed. But bowing and prostrating, meaning not gesturing. Now, there's one point to mention here. I don't think I clarified it. When we said on the boat, you have to bow and prostrate. It means you got to bow and prostrate on the ground. We said that actually for the boat. Same for the airplane. If you can bow and prostrate on your seat, in front of your seat somewhere, on the ground, then you don't have to repeat when you get off. If you can't do that, then you're going to gesture. And gesturing is, not going to be a valid form of prayer. So in that case, if you just gesture and pray, then when you get off, yes, you will need to make that up. Yeah, gesturing and praying is not valid for prayer on an airplane. unless you're ill, unless somebody's ill, that's actually maybe a blessing for them. So all their prayers are going to be by gesturing, right? Because they're ill. That's for the illness, not for the airplane. So they get
Yeah.
away with it, right? But normally, for normal healthy people, you have to bow and prostrate on the ground, on the surface of the plane, on the floor of the plane. So if you can't do that, you're going to gesture, then okay, gesture and pray because you respect the time and etc. Like we said, when you get off, yes, you will pray. If you get off in the time of the prayer, that's even fantastic. You don't have to do anything. You just got to pray your prayer. You got the time to pray. Obviously, if you've missed the
Yeah.
prayer time, you do a qada and you make up the prayer. Hope that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But obviously, on a seat in an aeroplane, Sheikh, you're not. The chances are, if you're gonna pray, you're not gonna be
Chances
able
are
to.
you are, but it's not always easy and possible. But one way of
Mm,
doing it, it's possible in this way, is if you ask the people who got the front aisles where they've got a bit more space in front of them to actually bow and prostrate, but they obviously people's seats. If you say, "Can I
mhm,
just have your seat for 2 minutes?" and you pray sitting in their seat, they won't let you stand up, and there is enough space sometimes to bow and prostrate on the ground there. I don't know if it is right. You can do that. If that's not available to you, fine. You just got to try your best. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. If it does, it does. Um,
and
on
when
our
you
way
land,
back from
okay.
Umrah, it was Etihad Airlines, so they were allowing everyone to pray anyway. People were
Mhm,
praying, all Muslims anyway. We come back from Hajj, but we were lucky to get seats on the aisle where there was no seat in front. One of the brothers actually was one seat that had no seat in front of it, and the end on the side. Sometimes the seats like that. So literally, he had like 2 meters of space. So we all of us who were with the group, with the brothers that were sitting together, we all prayed our prayer there because there was massive space to stand and bow and prostrate and everything. So we all took turns. It was Fajr prayer we read. We read our Fajr prayer quite easily because there was loads of space. We just swapped seats with him for 5 minutes each and prayed Fajr. So if you're lucky, got a nice seat, you can bow and prostrate or on the ground. Fantastic. Or if you're on an airline that allows it. If not, like I said, when you get off, just make sure you pray the prayers that you missed. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Exactly. Yeah, that
Okay.
should be.
Yeah. So that ends the section as well. Yeah, and we move on to the next section, which is very relevant for Ramadan, but nevertheless we'll read through it. It's the Salatul Taraweeh. So Bismillah.
Bismillah. The Taraweeh is a sunnah for both male and female.
Yeah.
Uh, do you want me to just read through a
Yeah,
few
read through
together? I
it.
think
So I
it
think
all.
we've been through the Taraweeh. We know what it is. It's fresh in our minds,
Yeah.
but the rulings are
Yeah.
there. So it's a Sunnah Muakkada for male and female. Go on, Bismillah.
To pray the Taraweeh in a group is a communal sunnah.
It's a communal Sunnah,
Uh,
like Janazah is a communal obligation. For there to be a communal congregation for Taraweeh is a communal Sunnah. So somebody has to do it, right? It's required of some of the um, Muslim community, not all of them. So if you want to pray at home, fine. There's 100 people in the masjid praying, the congregation, that's okay. So it's not required to be part of the congregation, but it's better to, it's more rewarding to if you can be.
uh, it, its time is after the Isha prayer until the arrival of dawn, and it is valid to offer the witr before or after the Taraweeh.
Yeah, so witr is after Tarawih, you're praying congregation and normally, but if you prayed your witr first, like you did 4 rakat fard of Isha, then 2 sunnah, then witr like you normally do, and then you made your Tarawih an hour later, that's fine. You put your witr first, but the order in Ramadan, because Tarawih is in Ramadan, by the way, right? We all know that. It's a prayer specific to the month of Ramadan. The witr comes after, and it's better to do it that way. That's the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But if you did it before, it's actually valid. The witr has to be after Isha, not after Taraweeh. So it's not valid to pray your witr as we learned earlier in the earlier sort of rulings. Witr must be after the fard of Isha, it can't be before. But it doesn't have to be after Taraweeh or the sunnahs. It can be any time after Isha, fard have been performed. Yep.
It is recommended to delay the Taraweeh prayers to one third of the night, to shortly before one third of the night has passed, or half of it. Other
Yeah.
scholars maintain that there is no dislike in delaying Taraweeh to after half the night, and this is the soundest view.
Yeah, so Taraweeh is a night prayer, and if you look at the way of the Sahaba, the Prophet did pray the Taraweeh prayer, but he kept it private. So we have a few narrations he prayed. People joined him, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, then he went private, and then the Sahaba, prayed their own Taraweeh prayers. And it was until the time of Sayyidina Umar, it became a communal prayer practiced together. But it was started like that. It was just kept private after that until that sort of. And people would come make their own congregations as well, actually, which is what led Sayyidina Umar actually to make that decision to put everyone together rather than have several congregations. He said, look, let's just have one big congregation, all the Muslims, and the tradition of one communal Taraweeh per community or per masjid now, I suppose. started. Whereas previously it was, whoever wanted to get together, whether it was at home, whether it was in the masjid, various congregations. It was done more smaller groups than larger groups before Sayyidina Umar and the Sahaba at that time made it a full communal one congregation. And then it says here the time, when they do the first Isha is obviously better in the after the first third of the night. So one third of the night has gone. Now is the best time for Isha. Similarly, Tarawih should be after that, of course. But it's a night prayer, so even if you do it later, it's fine. The night prayer, it's good at any time at the night. But obviously, and that, well, you might even say, well, what about Tahajjud then? If I pray it so long, then won't I miss Tahajjud, or won't I make it close to Tahajjud? Yes, you will. But the Sahaba did that. Sahaba prayed so long in Tarawih, not so late. They prayed so long in Tarawih. They finished their Tarawih, and they still be praying the Tahajjud, and they just have enough time to eat and close their fast and get ready for the next day. So they spend the whole night. They use the whole night of Ramadan for worship and for ibadah. So we learn that from the Sahaba. They did actually use a lot of the night for their prayers, Tarawih and Tarawih, Witr, and of course Tahajjud. So yeah, it doesn't really, as long as you use as much of the night as possible to pray, that's really one of the main goals of Ramadan. The night is for the prayer in Ramadan. How much is Tarawih? How much rakat is Tarawih?
Tarawih is 20 rakats consisting of 10 pairs of finishing salams.
Yeah. So you do 2 rakats salam, 2 rakats salam, 2 rakats salam until you're doing 20 rakats and 10 salams. That is the Tarawih that was read by the Prophet ﷺ. Initially, obviously, we have reports of 20 rakats, but people say there's no reports of 20 rakats. There's reports Prophet ﷺ prayed 20 rakats. They're just weak reports. And there are weak reports he prayed other numbers. I think 14 rakats, 18. There's various reports. And because all those reports are weak, we don't use them as a proof. Yeah, to be honest, we don't. What we use as a proof is what Sayyidina Umar did and what the Sahaba did. Thousands and thousands of Sahaba is they all said, well, 20 rakats, the congregation, that's the Tarawih prayer. So it shows us that they understood the Tarawih better than we ever would. And if they did as a unanimous decision, ijma' of Sahaba, right, consensus, all the Sahaba, obviously Abu Bakr had passed away, 1 or 2 Sahaba had passed away, but the majority of them were still alive at the time of Sayyidina Umar's leadership and establishing of the Tarawih prayer. And they all believed it to be 20 rakats, and they all made it into congregation. So that's what we have been doing ever since, alhamdulillah. So this is based on those historical events. And it's important to understand that the deen is not just based on one report in Sahih Bukhari or one hadith and so forth, right? It's based on the Quran, the Sunnah. Right? So the whole of the Quran, every single ayah that is, has a ruling or a relevance to that ruling, right? Depends on obviously what it is. And every hadith that has a relevance, and ijma, the consensus of the Sahaba, and the opinions of the Sahaba themselves of understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, and juristic, derivations and analogy, qiyas, right, and understanding, which is different over what kind of methodologies are applied, but it's a valid form of jurisprudence and law derivation and understanding of the law of the rules of Allah. So ultimately, all the rules of Allah is understanding them can differ slightly. And on this one, alhamdulillah, the Ummah at the time of Sayyidina Umar and ever since has always prayed 20 rakats during Ramadan. And it's a sunnah prayer, so there's no need to be too, stringent upon it. It means not to belittle sunnah either. It's very important not to say, oh, it's only a sunnah prayer. But it's not an obligatory prayer. So if somebody wants to pray 10, 12 rakats, 20 rakats, somebody wants to pray more rakats, say, look, I can pray 20, but I actually want to pray 50 tonight. Bismillah, pray 20 rakats Tarawih and pray 30 rakats Witr. 30 rakats nafil. Next day, pray 20 rakats Tarawih, then 20 rakats nafil. You can pray nafil. The door of nafil is open. So let people pray more if they want to pray more. And if they don't have the drive and they want to pray less, or they don't have the passion and desire, etc., then let them pray less. So be it. Obviously, there is this concept of following the sunnah. What is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and what is the sunnah? Then in that case, 20 rakats would be what you should do, because that's what all the Sahaba did. And it seems really, really, I don't know, absurd to say the Sahaba got it all wrong, hundreds of thousands of them, right? And now we're going to do 10, 12, 15 or whatever, right? Because we don't think they got it right. So I think it seems absurd to me to go against what the consensus of the Sahaba did. But at the same time, if somebody feels like they want to pray less rakats, that's fine. Don't attack somebody for praying salah. Right? Praise them for praying, right? Encourage prayer. No, alhamdulillah. So we pray 20 rakats. How do we pray these 20 rakats? What's the pattern of prayer, Hassan?
After completing 4 rakahs of Tarawih, it is recommended to sit and rest for as much time as was required for the performance of the 4 rakahs.
Yeah, so normally they'd pray 4 rakats, have a rest for the 4 rakats time, pray 4 rakats, have a rest. In that rest, they'd do dhikr of Allah. In Makkah, they'd do tawaf of the Kaaba. It's a whole night they just spend in worship, right? Now we obviously we want to get in and out of the masjid. So our breaks between 4 rakats are like 30-second breaks, 20, 30 seconds, not very long. We just want to get it done. And obviously, time is short in the summer months anyway for those of you in the Western world or the Northern Hemisphere in this time. Obviously, I think for those in the southern hemisphere, it's the opposite way around. They got plenty of time at night in Ramadan. So yeah, so it differs obviously where you are, but they would use their time to worship. That was their goal. We tend to have other goals in night of Ramadan, so we tend to use our time differently. But that was the tradition, and we're not in control of this tradition in the mosques. I think this just generally become a case of let's just get it done and go home. Whereas, even in Makkah today, actually, in certain places, they do actually extend it a bit more. They take a bit more time. They don't rush it. That's the idea, basically. Ibadah should be given its, a due care and attention. But yeah, the process is you pray 4 rakats, you have a break, you pray 4 rakats, you have a break, pray 4 rakats, you have a break. So in total, you will have 5 breaks and 5 sets of 40 rakats. And as it says, after the fifth break, the fifth tarweeha. So tarawih actually means breaks. When we say break, we mean relaxations, right? A period of rest. Istiraha, tarweeha is a form of relaxation and relieving oneself and giving oneself time to recuperate and then going back to worship. So that's what the name of the prayer is, tarawih. So you're supposed to have a rest, as you can see. Once you're doing the fifth one, 4 rakats, one rest, 4 rakats, two, 4 rakats, three, 4 rakats, four, 4 rakats, fifth rest, you've done 20 rakats. After the fifth one, you will perform the witr salah in congregation with the imam, and that will conclude the whole procedure of the evening. And then you can go home, you can pray nafal, people do du'as, etc. It's whatever you want to do after that. Bismillah Hassan, what's the next thing we learn about Taraweeh in Ramadan?
Um, I think you just covered the last. This is also the case between the last Tarawih prayer and the Witr. I
Yeah,
think
the
we just
last
covered.
Taraweeh, meaning the last rakats of Taraweeh, last 4 rakats. Have a break, meaning you also have a break, and then you perform the witr. Yep, Bismillah, carry on.
It is sunnah to recite the whole Quran in the Tarawih prayers once in the month of Ramadan, and this is the soundest view.
Yeah, so it is sunnah, again, communal sunnah for the community, not you as individuals. So if you pray at home and you don't finish the Quran, that's fine. Some scholars actually did say it's better to pray alone uh, in Ramadan, the Taraweeh as well. Some scholars have that opinion, not majority, because it's a form of personal worship and connection to Allah. And the Prophet himself, he prayed publicly, then he went home and prayed privately. But if you're going to come to a congregation, then it's one communal congregation. But yeah, so to finish the Quran then is a communal obligation. I mean, the community should provide a khatam of the Quran. Obviously the scholars, the imams, the huffaz. When I was in Syria, in Damascus, there's probably a few hundred, or maybe less than a few, maybe a couple of hundred masajid in Damascus, in one city. Is massive, mashallah. Obviously, it's fully Muslim or majority Muslim. There's Christians and I think Jews and other religions there as well. Um, there's masajid on every street corner or majority street corners, especially certain areas where it's predominantly Muslim and active Muslims. Some areas there's just less masajid, but still in one area where there's less masajid, you still have like 10 masjids in an area, right? Still a lot. In the densely populated and active areas, there'll probably be like 70 masajid, 60 masajid. There's a few areas are like that. So I'd say there's a couple of hundred, maybe more. I think I read at one point there was around 2,000 active masajid in Damascus, which is crazy. 2,000, but active meaning there was just like a little area room that was a masjid where the 5 daily prayers took place, right? So it wasn't like big masjid talking about when you say masjid or masajid, we refer to just a place of prayer. Currently now I think there's about 200-300 that are active. Out of those 200-300 masajid that were active in Damascus when I was there in 2000 and between 2005 2012, and I spent most Ramadans there in that time as well. I think one Ramadan I came back to the UK, and one Ramadan I went to Pakistan. So other than those two, I think I spent 5 Ramadans in Damascus. In those 5 Ramadans, and the same, alhamdulillah, every time, um, there was about 30 masajid, 30, that provided a Quran khatam out of the couple of hundred. And these ones that provided the khatam actually had a poster. Some of the, I don't know who it was exactly, but they made a poster saying, this masjid, there's a Quran khatam. They start their jamaat at this time of Isha. This is the scholars, the alhamdulillah, one of the best things was you had really big scholars of the Quran leading the Tarawih. So it was this scholar who's leading the Tarawih, and and so it might be 2 or 3 scholars in one masjid sharing the recitation, and they do their khatam on this night. So they'll do different khatams. So someone might finish the Quran on the 21st night. This masjid will finish the Quran on the 27th night, 25th night, 29th night. So they had a full poster literally of the timetable, not the timetable, but the kind of who's offering a khatam of the Quran and how it all works. And so you could basically go to any one of them if you wanted to read a khatam. All the rest of the masajid, they just recited portions of the Quran and so forth. So the first ever Tarawih I went to was the local masjid. I didn't know this when I first started. And they did Tarawih so quick. They didn't do khatam. It wasn't a khatam masjid, right? So it wasn't a masjid, they did a khatam. And they read really short ayats. It's literally Al-Fatiha, 2 ayats, and you into ruku. And I'm like, wow, this is how are we going to finish the Quran? Then somebody told me, no, you're not going to finish the Quran here. Go to this masjid, the closest masjid. So with it being only 30 masjids that do the khatam of the Quran, we had to actually find the closest one, which was Jami' Shaykh Muhyiddin or Jami' al-Salimiyah, which was the closest one to us, which is one in that area. Actually, Jami' al-Hajibiyah as well was one that offered it. We went to Jami' Shaykh Muhyiddin, and we did so I did all of my khatams there. So that was the masjid I attended for my Taraweeh prayers predominantly. And did khatams there. I remember being there on the 27th night once. Special incident occurred. The 27th night, a special masjid, mashallah. All the masajid are beautiful. But yeah, so our Taraweeh prayers, if you wanted the khatam, would have to be in specific masajid because not all of them did the khatam. Now, obviously, I think in the Western, most of the subcontinent is here and other sort of traditions. I think most of the masajid offer khatams of the Quran when they do have the Taraweeh. It's a tradition. They don't tend to do otherwise. However, in the more in Damascus and maybe other parts of the Islamic world as well, there is more emphasis on just praying the Taraweeh than doing the Khatam of the Quran. When I've been to Morocco in Ramadan once, again I saw masajid praying just normal rakats, not doing a Khatam of the Quran. And then I think some masajid were doing Khatam of the Quran, and they split their Taraweehs up into 10 and 10. So they pray 10 in the early part of the night and then 10 late in the later part of the night. They have a bit of a break in between some masajid there. So there are different traditions of performing the Taraweeh prayers around the Muslim world. But there it says here, it's sunnah to try and perform Khatam of the Quran in the community once at least. Yeah. Bismillah.
If the people dislike or become weary from the efforts of reciting the Quran, then the Imam is to recite the amount which does not deter the people from the prayer, and this is the opted view.
Yeah, so this was when obviously there was one congregation and everyone went to one congregation and so forth. But now you can just offer both options. Here's the Khatam of the Quran, and this is the case in all of the Muslim world, the whole world really now. Apart from areas where there may be, and there are areas actually, just to make a point here, there is only one accessible masjid for many miles, right? So in that situation, what do you do? Do you do a Khatam of the Quran? Because if you do a Khatam of the Quran, guess what? That brother, that family that lives 20 miles away, they come to this masjid for their Taraweeh, which is in certain parts of the world the case. They're not going to come for a Khatam of the Quran because they've got to stand so long. They want to come for short Taraweeh. They want to come to see the Muslim community. It might actually deter people. Then the community has to make a decision. The ulama, the imams make a decision. What do we want? A larger congregation and getting everybody together in Ramadan, the masjid, or there might be a fear here now of people pulling out or not coming to as many Taraweehs or being lazy because they feel the daunting task of standing there listening to the whole Quran. It's a beautiful thing, but not everyone has the same drive and passion. That's what the Imam Shurun Bulari is addressing that. Okay, if it's going to lead to people not coming because of that, and it's a reality, should we change up? Well, if you can offer both options. That's probably the best thing to do. But if you can't, then yeah, maybe you should think about the communal aspect and getting everybody into the masjid for Ramadan and speaking to them and being in that environment. Because them not coming to the masjid, that's actually detriment to them in particular, right? So you decide that which will keep the people coming to Taraweeh and shortening the prayers. But when you do that, don't shorten it so much that you start wiping off part of the prayer. What do I mean? Bismillah.
However, the Ibrahimiyya in every tashahhud of the Taraweeh prayer must not be neglected, even if the people dislike it. And this is a chosen view on the matter.
Yeah, and?
Likewise, one is not to abandon the opening glorification at the beginning of each Taraweeh prayer, and neither the tasbih in bowing and prostration.
Yeah, so don't leave the Durood Sharif or Salawat Prophet. Don't leave the Thana, Subhanakallah Mabindika, and don't leave the proper tasbih 3 times in Ruku and Sujood. That should be done properly. if you don't want to make it too long a Tarawih, still incorporate all of these things. However, if you want to shorten it even a bit more, you can leave out the dua at the end. Because you're going to make dua at the end of the Tarawih anyway. Dua, obviously, it's recommended to make at the end of prayers, right? It's not as emphasized sunnah as the other parts of the emphasized sunnah, such as the tasbihat, and very much some regarded them obligatory, even the tasbihat, right? The subhan rabbiyal a'la, subhan rabbiyal a'la. Others said sunnah muakkada. Similarly, salawat upon the Prophet ﷺ, according to some scholars, is required in prayer. According to other scholars, it's emphasized sunnah in prayer. However, with the dua at the end, more or less all scholars, if not, I think all scholars agree that it's a recommended act in the prayer, not required for the validity of the prayer, or emphasized to the level of a high requirement. So that's what it says next. If you read on Hassan, it says,
Yeah. However, if the people become weary, the Imam may abandon the supplication.
yeah. So the supplication at the end of each two rakats. So but we normally read Rabbi Jalni Muqim as-salati wa min dhurriyyati Rabbana wa taqabbal du'a, etc. Or we might read Allahumma inni dhalamtu nafsi dhulman kathiran wa la yaghfiru dhunuba illa anta faghfir li. And the dua here, there's various duas. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min fitnati al-mahya wal mamat wa fitnati al-masih ad-dajjal wa fitnati adhab al-qabr. There's various duas that are obviously recited at the end of prayer by the Prophet ﷺ, and you can recite. So those are the ones we're talking about. You leave those out if you feel like it's going to be better for the community, that they're going to be like, oh yeah, let's come to the Tarawih, it gets done quicker, and then you get congregation is a bit more lively with you, etc. That can be left out. That's the option there if that is the case. But however, what some said, just shorten it. Just say Rabbi Ighfir warham wa anta khairur rahimin. Just a chronic dua. Allahumma ighfir lana. Assalamu alaikum. So make a short dua even, right? So keep the dua there, but make it a very short one is an option as well. Or do it in some rakats, don't do it other rakats, but don't leave it completely out, right? So this is some guidance for the imams really and those who lead the Tarawih. And the last masala here in this section.
If a person fails to offer the Tarawih by himself or in a group, it cannot be made up later.
Yes, there's no qada of Tarawih. So Tarawih is for that day. Like any sunnah prayer, it's for that night. Every night has its own Tarawih. You miss that night, you miss the Tarawih. There's no qada of sunnahs, there's no qada of Tarawih prayers. You could pray nafil the next day in remorse and just say, I want to make up for the loss of Tarawih. But you can't say, I'm doing qada of Tarawih, Allahu Akbar. There's no qada of miss sunnah prayers. There's only qada of fard and wajib prayers. Okay? So if you miss, and those, not all fard and wajib prayers, not all fard and wajib prayers have qada. The fard prayer that does not have qada is the janaza prayer, and the wajib prayers that don't have qada is Eid prayer. So if you miss Eid prayer, there's no qada of Eid prayer. Yeah, that's the one. You do qada with the one. So if you miss your vowed prayer, you have to make it up. If you don't pray your fard prayers, you have to make them. If you don't pray your witr prayer, you have to make your witr up. Yeah, right. So in nafal and sunnah, if you miss a prayer, it's missed. So yeah, that concludes that section on the Taraweeh prayer. The next section is on praying in and around the Kaaba itself. So on the Kaaba, in the Kaaba, how does that work? So Bismillah Hassan.
Praying in the Kaaba. Obligatory and optional prayers are permissible within the Kaaba.
Yeah, so if you went inside the Kaaba itself and you prayed in the Kaaba, perfectly fine. And people have done that. May Allah bless them. They've had the opportunity to do that. Of course, the Prophet ﷺ did, and others, the Sahaba probably had much more opportunity. But today's day and age, if you're very lucky to be given the opportunity, Alhamdulillah. But it's valid, yep, it's good. Bismillah, carry on.
Likewise, the obligatory and optional prayers are permitted on top of the Kaaba, even if one does not place a barrier for himself. Although it is disliked to do so because it is an offensive etiquette to get on top of the Kaaba.
Yeah, so what if somebody climbs on top of the physical Kaaba building and prays on the ceiling, on the roof, sorry, of the Kaaba? That's valid as well because whether you're in or above, or you're facing facing the Kaaba itself. So, if you're on the Kaaba, it doesn't matter which way you face. Actually, is going to mention that, I think. The Kaaba is the Qibla, so as long as you're facing part of it, which if you're standing on it, you're going to be facing a part of it. If you're inside it, you're going to be facing any part. So when you're in the Kaaba, the question is which way do I face anyway? It's fine. You can face anyway whilst in the Kaaba. So the Qibla is not one point. The Qibla is the whole structure of the Kaaba itself. So that's actually several meters you got to aim at if you're close to the Kaaba. Obviously, far away, just the direction is generally what you go with. You got the leeway as well, right? So yeah, you can pray on top of it as well, but it's not good because you don't stand on the Kaaba and pray. It's just you have to go above the Kaaba for a reason. So the workers that go on there to the kiswa, to cleaning and all that, that's fine. They're there for a reason. That's okay. But if you're just going to standing on top of the Kaaba to pray, then that's not good etiquette. Yeah. Next one.
If when performing prayer in congregation inside the Kaaba, if a follower turns his back to any direction other than the face of his Imam, then his following is deemed valid. If,
Yeah.
however,
So
the follower
yeah, carry on, sorry.
if, however, the follower turns his back towards the face of the Imam, then his prayer is nullified.
Yeah. So basically, if you are facing in any way away from your basically your back is not facing the imam. So you can be facing face to the imam, you can be facing the side of the imam, you can be facing your back could be to the back of the imam. In all of these circumstances, your prayer is valid if that you and the imam are in the car. We're just saying it for the reason of saying it, but in reality, that's not going to happen, right? The only way you would not be in a valid prayer is if your back was to the face of the imam. So you're standing in front of him and your back is towards him as well. In that case, you would say you're standing in front of him and your prayer can't be behind that person in the Kaaba. It's all in the Kaaba, by the way. Um, then yeah, it wouldn't be valid. So yeah, just take that one situation where your back is to the face of the imam, supposedly, then that's not valid to follow. Any other situation, it doesn't matter which way you're facing the Kaaba, because like I said, you're facing the Qibla basically. So the imam could be facing this way, and you could have your back to be facing that way, but you're facing the Qibla, so you're behind the imam, you're behind his back. It's fine, right? So in all those circumstances, you're okay. Apart from the one circumstance, your back is to the face of the imam. In that case, it's not valid. Um, but yeah, um, let's carry on. It's not going to be something that we deal with. Yeah.
One's following of the Imam is valid if the Imam prays inside the Kaaba with the door open while the followers pray outside.
Yeah, the door. It doesn't matter if the door's open or not open, as long as they know the movements of the imam. As long as they know the imam's praying and they're following him, that's fine. The door being open is just an additional comment. It's not really required. Um, and it goes back to a previous thing we had with conditions of following the imam is good to know of the movements of the imam. That's the only thing required. So basically, the situation is the imam's inside the Kaaba, you're outside of the Kaaba. Is it valid to follow the imam? Yes, it is. As long as you know the movements of the imam, it's valid. That's what's required. So the door being open, meaning you know what the imam is doing. It's another way of saying you know what the imam is doing. Yep, you're fine to follow him, no problem. Bismillah.
If many followers, including the Imam, offer prayer around the Kaaba in a circular manner, then all the prayers are valid except for the one who advances in front of the Imam in the same side the Imam is praying.
Yeah, so this happens obviously all the time. We pray in a circle. We do the tahallaqu, right? It says the tahallaqu. We make circles around the Kaaba, rings. Everyone's a ring all around the Kaaba, all the way outwards, right? Whichever, several, a few, maybe 30, 40, 50, 60, maybe rings all the way back, right? And once you go out of the masjid, then it's just probably no rings left, right? So everyone's prayer is valid, okay? Apart from, and which is not going to happen as well, right? The person who's in the same direction as the imam. So the imam's, let's say, facing, you all know, those of you been, you all know the black stone corner, right? The imam doesn't really play behind the black stone corner, they play to one side of it. But let's say they're playing towards between the Yemeni corner and the black stone corner. I think many of you know that. Sometimes the imam does play there. I don't think they commonly play there. Maybe they do. Um, right? So the imam comes forward, and nobody's in front of the imam. It's ridiculous. But imagine somebody just say, "Oh, I'm going to pray right next to the Kaaba," but the imam's like 5 meters back from the Kaaba, and they do that. They usually put the imam a few meters back, not right next to the Kaaba. Somebody decides to pray in front of the imam on that side. That person's prayer, because he's directly in front of the imam, is invalid. You can't pray behind this imam. You can pray his own prayer, but you can't follow the imam because he's in front of him. But there might be people on the other side of the Kaaba, opposite, and on the right hand side and left hand side, that are right next to the Kaaba. And if you measure the distance of the imam from the Kaaba is 5 meters, and you mention their distance to the Kaaba is 30 centimeters, 10 centimeters, that's fine because they're not in the same direction as the imam. They're on the opposite side, on the left and right. Their prayer is valid because they're behind the imam technically from the opposite side. Right? The one on the same side as the Kaaba, as the imam, in front of him, that's the only person whose prayer would be invalid in a congregational prayer at Masjid al-Haram. So there's only one place in the world this is referring to, which is the Kaaba. So those who are going on Umrah, Hajj, and I don't think anybody's going to get that close to the Kaaba for the time to be really in front of the Imam for the time to be worried about that. But it's just a ruling to bear in mind, I suppose. Right? Any questions, Hassan?
No, that one again. I think you've just said that it's not really gonna. The last section is not really gonna affect any of us.
Yeah, it's not really. That's right. So I mean, this is just rulings that are good to know, and I can't see them being
Yeah,
applied anywhere else. Hence, like I'm saying, it's very specific place
yeah,
and very rare situations which may not really occur. But it's the rulings that need to be known, I suppose, of prayer
indeed.
in and around the Kaaba and the rulings regarding. And the next section is on the traveler's prayer. So we'll stop here for today. Thank you for joining us. Jazakumullah khairan. Next week we'll go through the traveler's prayer. I believe after that is the ill person's prayer. Now, what if you do, or how do you pray if you're ill? Very important two sections now coming up. So please do join us. Jazakumullah khairan. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Take care. Assalamu
Walaikum
alaikum.
assalam.